What if you could make more money by literally doing no extra work? That'd be good. Or what if you could have more profit in your pocket by simply asking a few better questions at the beginning of the relationship? Both outcomes are possible if you become a better negotiator. And that is the theme of tonight's Idea Collective Night School. We've got a very special panelist, Ann Knutson, HR Director and Senior Vice President of Bank 59, to show us the ropes and teach us how to be better negotiators as small business owners. Welcome to Idea Collective Night School, a monthly education event designed to help you become a better small business owner. Night School is sponsored by Bank 59, the best bank on the planet. I pretty much have to say that. And you'll learn that Ann works at Bank 59, right? So we have to say best bank on the planet when I say it. Anyway,
Of course.
sponsored by Bank 59 and Quick Trip and Serendipity Labs, and of course, the Idea Collective for small business owners. Now, before we start the show, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk with and learn from Ann. But even though it's called Night School, it's not like school, meaning if you got to raise your hand and you've got a question, awesome. The better questions that we get to Ann, the more we are all going to learn. And then when we're done, we're going to hang out and do a little bit of networking and maybe some conversation about maybe things we learned or some observations or questions we forgot to ask. So we'll do that at the end of the conversation tonight. So with all of that stuff behind us, let's get to the good stuff. Ann Knutson, HR Director and Senior Vice President of Bank 59. Howdy. How are you?
I am awesome, Pat, and I am really honored to be part of this group this evening. It's really exciting, and I am lucky enough to talk about a topic that I am incredibly passionate about. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's our pleasure. So I think someone that doesn't know what you do would say an HR VP of a bank is going to talk to us about negotiation. But there's that whole I teach negotiation thing. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'd love to share a little bit more. Just in terms of even a little bit, expanding a little bit further beyond that, I've always been passionate about negotiating. And in fact, I won't go into the long history of it, but I started negotiating purposefully at about the age of 7. And that continued through my childhood into high school and college and beyond. And one of my first jobs out of college was working in claims. So I was really in a position to have to negotiate multi-million-dollar claims for a variety of situations. And it became a topic that I realized that I was really passionate about. I came to understand a lot of the benefits of really being able to stand your ground, state your position, to be able to really get what you want. And an opportunity presented itself about 6 or 7 years ago at Waukesha County Technical College, where I was an adjunct instructor for a variety of HR topics. And I was presented an opportunity to say, we've got this negotiations class. What do you think? I was like, I'm all over it. I'm so excited to be able to do this. And so I formally taught the negotiations class for about 5 years at Waukesha County Technical College. And since that time, I've kind of taken my show on the road, if you will. And I spend a lot of time with a variety of professionals, whether they're individuals going through night school like yourselves, for business owners, and even other HR professionals that I find really, really could use some help in this arena. So I continue to do my work and pave the way and help people achieve the objectives that Pat stated, which is a little bit more money in your pocket, feeling better about the deal that you've secured, and getting more confident about what you're doing.
Well, I know we could all use the help on negotiation, and I really want to get into the meat of it all. But I got to stop and say, how do you fall in love with negotiation at 7? Like, what intrigued you about 7, and what were you negotiating at 7?
Oh, I am so glad you asked that question. I love telling the story. So I grew up in a family. There were 4 siblings. 3 of us were just 1 year apart, and then the 4th one came along a few years later. We were a family without a lot of means, and I had to get creative to be able to get what I wanted. And at a very young age, I would say I had an entrepreneurial spirit, even though I didn't recognize it as that at that point in time. So I knew though I wanted to save money to do something with it at some point. So I was really crafty and a little bit sneaky when I would get my Easter candy or I would get Halloween candy. And I was just the best at encouraging my siblings to eat all their candy. Like, doesn't that look delicious? And don't you want to eat that? And in the meantime, I'm hoarding my candy. So when all of their candy was gone, I would pull my candy out and say, would you like this? And of course, they're like, yeah, I'd like it. You got to pay for it. What are you going to be willing to pay? This is how much I'm going to charge. And then I came to learn what candy was more valuable and what went faster than some of the other candies. So I'd wait for the best stuff for last until it was almost all gone. And then I was able to yield the greatest profit.
All right. You are 1,000% qualified. That is the greatest negotiation story I've ever heard. Okay. So let's start at the beginning. Negotiation. Okay. How do we define it? Let's get our head right on what it is and what it isn't. How do you define negotiation?
The best and most simple way that I define negotiation is about a back and forth process to get what you want. That's negotiation. Pretty simple.
And that's it. Just a conversation back and forth to get what you want.
Back and forth process to get what you want. That's why we negotiate.
Okay. That makes sense. So what does it take to be a good negotiator? Like if you were picking a negotiator or hiring one, what characteristics make a good negotiator?
You know, it's really, it's a great question. I think a lot of people have a misunderstanding about what makes a good negotiator. If I were to poll the group and say, you know, what comes to mind when you think about negotiation? A lot of people will say someone who's intimidating, someone who is a bit bossy, someone who is aggressive. And I'm here to tell you that after applying all these strategies myself personally throughout all the years that I have been negotiating, I found that the best characteristics are someone that you would actually define as someone who's being humble, modest, and someone who there's really a number of strengths. And I would say it's number one, being a good communicator. And we often talk about the listening skills and the written skills and the verbal skills. And negotiation is predominantly having those listening skills, 80% listening, 20% talking. It's also someone who is going to be able to keep their cool. And what I mean by that is someone who it doesn't get emotionally involved in the situation, so remaining unemotional. It's also someone who is confident. If you go into a negotiation and you go into a car dealership to buy a vehicle and you walk up kind of mousy and, well, I'm here and I'd like to buy a car and this is what I have. That does not display confidence. Contrast that with you're walking into a dealership with your research and your papers in your hand to say, I'm looking at this vehicle. This is the research that I've done, and this is the vehicle that I want to purchase. Who is the person that I can talk to that can make the decision surrounding this? So that's that whole confidence piece is a huge component. And last but not least, it's someone who also people often think about negotiations as unethical and having to lie or be untruthful with their position or with the information they're willing to share. And really a characteristic of a good negotiator is someone who is ethical, who is respectful of other people. And if we have time, we can talk a little bit about that. How are you able to successfully get what you want without perhaps maybe telling a little white lie? And there's ways around that. But I would say those are the critical components of characteristics of a good negotiator.
That's fantastic stuff. And let's just stop. Like if this was like back in the 80s, we got our cassette deck running. Well, you're too young for that. But back in the 80s, you got the cassette deck running and you hit pause. All right, we stop the interview. I think if you ask someone, what does it take to be a good negotiator? 9 people out of 10 would say tough, brash, short, not short, but angry and like curt aggressive. And like aggressive and like, take it or leave it and pound it on the table and cursing at people. I think that's what people think. Does that lead us to not look at negotiating the right way? Because we've either been trained or it's been romanticized that that's what it takes to be a good negotiator?
Well, believe it or not, Pat, the style that you defined and I described as well is considered to be a competer style. And actually, there is a time and a place for using a style and approach like that. And if you were to ask me what my natural style is, that is my natural style. And I think it was something that I grew up with having to compete with my siblings, and then moving into the claims environment and negotiating multi-million-dollar claims, and then eventually into multi-million-dollar contracts. So in those instances, there is a time and a place for a style like that. But there are actually 4 other styles that I talk about in terms of taking on a negotiation style. The key is identifying what your own natural style is, understanding the other styles, and then identifying what is the style that you're working with so that you can adapt your approach of negotiation with the person that you're negotiating with.
Okay. So we got to know, we got time this is night school. This isn't like some 5-minute interview. We got you, right. And we got questions coming in, and we're going to get to those as well. But now I'm really intrigued, right? So you got to know your own style, and there are 4 styles. So question 1, 5 styles.
The competing style is 1, and I haven't shared the other 4 yet.
Holy cow. Okay. So let's just list them. Can we list them? So first one is competing, and competing means what?
Competing means it's my way or the highway. And I think about it in terms of a game of tug or war. There's a winner and there's a loser. That's the best way of thinking about that style.
Okay, that's 1. Now there's 4 more.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what are they?
The other style is considered accommodating. And usually when I poll my students, the vast majority of individuals that have been in my classes would say they're the accommodating style, which is I'm willing to give up a little bit, and you're willing to give up a little bit, but I might give up a little bit more because I want to maintain our relationship, or I want to build a friendship, or I don't want to burn any bridges. So that would be considered the accommodating style.
Okay, that's 2.
That's 2.
3 is?
The third I would put out there is I'm going to talk about the compromising approach. And that truly is someone who truly gives up something, and the other party gives up something, and it's about equal. So I'm willing to give up a portion of what it is that I was looking to get. That party is looking for that equal distribution. So ultimately, we're compromising. I'm going to give up something, you're going to give up something, and it's going to be what people often think of as a win-win negotiation. But I'm going to tell you why that's not a win-win negotiation.
Oh,
you want to hear?
Yes. Come on, bring it on.
No.
Let's go.
It's not. How can it be a win if I'm giving up something I really wanted to get? That's not a win. And that other party is also giving up something. So that's also not considered a win-win. And there is a time and a place for compromising, just like all these styles. But I know we want to get through the styles first.
All right. So we're on 3.
We're on 3.
Do you say it was competing or competitor?
It is competing. Excuse me. That one is the compromising style.
Compromising, competing, and accommodating. Those are the 3 we've done so far.
So far. 4. Here's one there's always a couple people in the classroom that are going to raise their hand to this one, which is the avoider, right? The people who will run away as fast as they can. I'm seeing someone nodding her head saying, that is me, right? It's, you know what? Here's my wallet. Here's the contract. Sign this, whatever it is you want, you got it. Because I would rather have a tooth pulled without Novocaine over having to get involved in a negotiation. So those are the people who are avoiders.
Yeah.
And believe it or not, there's a time and a place for the avoiding style as well. What if it's really not a big deal? It's someone at work that wants to get a Subway instead of Cousin Subs, and it's someone you're trying to rebuild a relationship with. Let them have it, right? I'm going to avoid that. I don't even need to get into it.
Yeah,
but
that's good.
But oftentimes people use that style simply because they don't want to get involved in the negotiation.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. All right, we got 4 down. What's the 5th? 5th and final one? There's 5 total. What's the 5th one?
There's 5 total. And this is the one that most business owners will want to focus on. And the one that's the most challenging because it takes the longest in terms of planning it out. You ready for it? Okay. It's called the collaboration style. And the collaboration style means I win and you win. So when we're getting into a contract negotiation, we have to center and focus on, we want a long-term relationship. I can only pay what I want to pay. I'm only willing to give up so much, and this is what I can do. And the other party has their own goals. You end up coming together to be able to make it work so everybody becomes a winner.
All right, this is so much content, and there's so much here that I want to ask about because I want to learn about the 5 different styles. But more importantly, I want to ask you how we find out which version we are. But before we do that, because I think that might be a little detailed, there's a great question in the chat from Amanda who says, can we discuss different negotiating styles for women and as men? The difference between the genders and the negotiating, because it is, I don't want to assume that it's a thing because that would be a very man thing for me to do, but is that a thing that we observe, and why is that a thing?
I would say there is some validity to it, at least with my experiences over the years, with the individuals that I've had to negotiate and the situations when I've walked into a car dealership by myself and the first question becomes, is your husband here to talk about the car? Ready to set me off. You just go ahead and say that. Go right ahead and say that. So little do they know that my natural style is a competing style. So I'm like, bring it on. I'm like, it's perfect though. I've learned in situations like that when someone assumes because I'm a female that I'm going to be a little bit more timid, a little bit more mousy, I go along with it. And then at the end, I can go in for the kill because I've done the planning, I've done the preparation, I've done the research, and I'm confident, I'm not shy, and I want to get what I want to get when I want it. But I would say in general, if someone were to say who tends to be a stronger negotiator in terms of style and approach, it's the male gender. And so when women, if we don't have or display that same level of confidence, we're going to end up not being able to get what we want out of the negotiation. And that's why it's so very important for each of us to go through the whole preparation stage of negotiation. And more so than that, and one of the things that I really emphasize with my students is, what do you have, if you want to become the world's best tennis player, can you just go out and buy a tennis racket and say, you know what, tomorrow I'm going to be the world's best tennis player? Of course not. You have to play matches over and over and over again. And do you start with Wimbledon? Do you start with the best tennis match you possibly can? You don't, right? You start in the backyard or at the school grounds and just batting the tennis ball around. I'm saying all of that because, believe it or not, there are ways in which we can all practice negotiation. And that tends to be through smaller situations that it's not a lot of fanfare, right? I mean, people think of negotiation as these big one-time events. Negotiations happen all day long, every single day. Anytime you ask someone a question, you are opening yourself up to a negotiation. It's as simple as that. When you stop at a stop sign at the same time as another vehicle, that's a negotiation. Don't realize that. Now, the rules of the road will say the person on the right goes first. Does it always happen that way? No. It's the person who's more aggressive or someone who's scooting out, or like, if you're like me, like, I'm going, I need to go, I'm in a rush. I do these signs, like hoping they can understand what it is that I'm saying. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But the bottom line is there can be a difference, although I've seen the reverse. And again, I can scare a lot of people off with my approach, depending on which one I need to use. And there is a benefit to getting older because you become more wise and you know when you need to use that competing style, when you maybe even need to avoid, which is really hard for me because I don't like to avoid those situations, to ultimately get into collaboration. But getting confidence, practicing.
So I want to ask you how we want to proceed. Do we want to go into how we learn about what our style is and how we own our style? Or do you want to talk about negotiation in general and then get into the individual styles? Because I want to do it the way that you want to present it, not the way that I'm curious about it. So what do you think is the better way to go?
We can go a lot of different ways. I can talk just very briefly about style. And quite honestly, just a little bit of what I've shared. It's what is your nature? Who are you as an individual? Mm-hmm. And here's the best way to think about it. These styles that I've talked about are actually considered conflict management styles. So when you think about a conflict and you think about what do you do to resolve conflict? Are you the person to storm in and like, it's my way or the highway? Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Those are the situations that I would say you're probably that competer. Or are you someone to go, I just want to make peace. I just, I want things to be calm. I don't want to rock the boat. Well, you're probably someone who's an accommodator or even a compromiser, someone who runs away from conflict. You're the avoider. And then, of course, someone to go, let's sit down and hash this out and talk about it and figure things out. It's pretty simple to go, I'm now in that collaborative style. So it's pretty easy to identify what your style is by just equating to how it is that you work through conflict. Because people tend to think of negotiation as conflict. It really isn't, but it's the best way to identify what your style is. The next simple part of that, Pat, just for me to emphasize is people ask this question, the nature versus nurture debate. Are you born with it or is it something you learn? Here's the super cool thing about it. If you're not born with the skill set of being a natural negotiator, you can absolutely acquire those skills to become a very gifted negotiator. Again, I started at about purposefully negotiating about the age of 7. So I would say a lot of nature was involved in that. But I've really honed in on my skills to realize, oh, you mean there's more than the computer style? Because until I was about the age of 35, I thought it was just always getting what I want when I want. So a really easy way for you to be able to identify, but recognize there are 5 styles out there. And just by those little tips, hopefully you can identify what style it is you're working with to be able to position yourself for a successful negotiation.
I love that listening to your conflict resolution style might illustrate what type of natural negotiation style you would fall into. And Amanda asks in the chat, we can use or be more than one style though, correct?
100%. To be the best possible negotiator that you can, I would encourage all of you to really get comfortable with each of those styles and know when to use them and when not to use them, equally as important. So you really should hone in and start with one, identify your style and to go, maybe I'm not going to go to the complete opposite one. If you're an avoider, I'm not going to say, learn how to be a competitor. Maybe we start simple. We start with, we're going to compromise. We're going to go into accommodation and then build on that skill set to become more, again, confident. That's what we've been talking about with negotiation. A great characteristic is having that confidence.
Got it. So here's what I want to do. This is fascinating information, but it feels to me like some of this stuff is 200, 300, 400 level stuff. Like we could get really down into these different styles and ways to use all the different techniques and become a great negotiator. And I'm sure that you can help us do that. But I do want to make sure that the night school is useful to someone that's kind of skimming the material and wants to get better and doesn't really want to go into the 300 level stuff. So let's go back to the general conversation and just say, okay, how do we start a negotiation? I know that I'm going to have to negotiate something. Where do we begin to set ourselves up for success?
So the best way for me to share that, Pat, I was thinking a little bit about an example. When you think about a vacation that you plan, let's say it's a week-long family vacation. Think about the time and effort that we put into planning that vacation. And if it's a local vacation, we're going up north, maybe for a family of 4, we're spending $1,500, $2,000. We might spend weeks, if not months, planning the vacation, calling hotels, finding out the costs for different events and activities that we can participate in. When we think about a negotiation and going into maybe it's a contract negotiation, I would challenge you and question you, how much time are you investing in the whole planning piece? Now, the planning time should correspond appropriately to what it is that you're either paying for something or that you're going to be selling something for. So if you're going to be purchasing an item at a flea market for $10, I would say you probably don't need to do a week-long research on how cheap you can go to get a paperback book that you want. But if you're negotiating a contract and maybe it's with a provider that someone's going to offer payroll services to your business, for example, and maybe that's going to cost $20,000 a year, you've got to make sure to do the research. You got to find out what the options are. You've got to find out what the costs are associated with it. Obviously, what you're willing to spend. The planning is where you're going to invest the majority of your time through any negotiation. And believe it or not, the rest of it is easy once you know the strategies and techniques. Then we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Making it easy. Okay, let's talk about making it easy. Okay, so can you talk us through the planning process so the rest of the stuff can be easy? Because that sounds really attractive.
Yeah. So Pat, I think it would be helpful if you gave me an example of something that would be meaningful to the class on what it is we're negotiating. And then I can get really specific.
All right. Well, let's say that we'll use me as an example. I am going to do coaching for a client, and we're negotiating the retainer rate for the arrangement. And let's just say it's $100 for easy math. I'm hoping to get $100 a month to coach you as a client. Is that a good example?
That's a great example. And I would say, let's say it's recurring. Can we add that piece to it?
Absolutely.
So it's $100 a month for the course of the year. So now we're talking about $1,200. And for someone they're investing, that's a lot of money, and trying to figure that out. But you as the business owner want to make sure that you secure that $100 a month.
Correct.
And the whole planning piece, number one, comes in understanding the client that it is that you're working with. The bigger part of it is making sure that you are working with a decision maker. So if you're trying to negotiate a contract and you're working through someone who maybe is more at the level where they're bringing information back to their boss or to their leadership, now all of a sudden you lose the synergy of the negotiation because that person's not in a position of power to be able to make that decision. Because what you're going to do is you're going to offer all the things. The planning piece is you do your research on the client. What are the needs? You're doing the needs analysis. You're identifying that and how it is. So you're really selling what it is without trying to come off as a salesperson. And you can do that successfully when, again, you do the needs analysis and you're anticipating what it is that they might be looking for. And you're sharing that ahead of time. You're talking about the value. The other thing you're going to bring to the table is you're going to say, as Pat, hey, if someone's reluctant right away, you get this sign, you get this reaction of, that's way too much money. And to say, well, I recognize it is. Other research that I've done shows that if you were to hire someone else or go external to another consultant, this is what you're going to be paying. It's going to be $150. And there are a variety of things. So you want to start small. You don't want to overwhelm the person that it is that you're working with. And through all these things, you've done the planning, you start the conversation, and then you get their reaction. Where are they coming from? What is it they're willing to do? And that's where the listening is a key piece. And so often those of us who work in sales or have tried to sell a product or service, we talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And maybe the person just doesn't, they don't even, there are some people where I've done that in my career to go, where do I just want to buy it. Like, oh, I spent all that time. Or we can turn people off too, because we sound too salesy with it. So then letting the other person respond. And that's what I talk about, that whole back and forth process, letting the other person respond. Here's the biggest pitfall many people fall into. You want to hear what that is, Pat? With negotiation?
Heck yeah.
So the other party, let's just say it's Jennifer, and you are negotiating with Jennifer. And Jennifer is saying, Pat, that's just, nope, that I can't do it. That's just too much money. I can't invest that on a monthly basis. I've got too many other expenses. I'll figure out something else. So the pitfall oftentimes that someone like Pat could fall into is to say, okay, how is $80? Is that better? Does that work better for you? What have I just done there? I am negotiating against myself. I am coming down in price before the other person even responded, other than it's too much money. Well, let's find out. Let's do a little digging. We're going to ask more questions. What does that mean, too much money? Why is this an issue? Why is this a challenge? Then what you need to do is put that other person in the position to say, why is it an issue? Why is it a challenge? What are you thinking? Now, that other person may come back, and some people use this as a strategy, and I don't recommend it unless Well, there's a caveat to it. We're going to talk about lowballing. So let's say Jennifer comes back and says, Pat, I want to hire you and I'm going to give you $20 a month. Deal or no deal? Well, now Jennifer is just lowball Pat. And in that case, again, there's a time and a place for it. When oftentimes we get a lowball offer, you can say, we're just too far apart. We're just too far apart. What I've learned to say in cases like that, where I used to before get angry and get emotional, again, remember, best characteristics of a good negotiator is remaining unemotional, is to go, I'm so sorry I've wasted your time. It was great to meet with you. I really appreciate it. And I really feel bad that, the next coffee's on me, or I'm glad I bought you that coffee, whatever it is, you walk away from it. Because inevitably, if that person really wants to work with you in your service, they're going to say, wait a minute. Wait, can we talk a little bit more? Sure. Let's keep the conversation going. And so again, it's that back and forth process. If someone's throwing a lowball offer out there and you can't, don't start trying to negotiate with that, because in the end, you're going to end up negotiating now against $20. And if you compromise, then you end up with, well, now I'll take $60 for the service, when really you didn't want to go below 90. So that's kind of that whole, there's an art and a science behind it. The science is the research. That's the preparation. The art piece comes with that practice. Again, a little bit of that back and forth and knowing when to insert yourself, when to walk away. Really, really important. And again, never negotiating against yourself.
It's a great piece of advice. And the line of, I'm so sorry I wasted your time, that's some ninja level stuff. That's really good. One of my mentors used to say, when negotiating, he would say, don't do something that ends the conversation. Always keep the conversation going. Even if you don't get a deal, don't close off the opportunity for a deal, because you never know. Like you say, if we walk away and say, I'm sorry I wasted your time, they may say, but wait, and that could keep the opportunity on the table. But even if you're declining the opportunity, don't do something that ends the conversation. Does that make sense to you?
It absolutely makes sense. And again, it just depends on the situation. Now, if there was a question to say, have you ever lowballed someone successfully? Absolutely. But I'll tell you how I do it. I do it by saying, number one, I don't even think I should offer this to you. I've done it when I purchase items, and it's usually from people I don't know. So I'll start with this little trick. I am so afraid to insult you. I don't even want to put an offer out there. And if usually people take the bait, well, just tell me what you're thinking. No, really, I don't want to insult you. And well, tell me. And then say, honestly, it's a lowball offer. And here's why it's a lowball offer. This is all that I have. This is all that I've allocated towards this. So you're building the case, and you're also developing a relationship. So you're not insulting someone. And that way, someone later is going to find it really difficult to come back to go, well, that was really insulting. They're not going to see it because they already gave you permission to give them a lowball offer. Wow. So there is a time and a place for it. Now, in business contracts and agreements, not often does that come up. But I will tell you, here's another real big secret to negotiating. Staying quiet. Staying quiet. I was able to negotiate a contract with a provider. It was going to be annualized spend of $100,000 is what was proposed to me. This just was a couple of years ago. And we met at a coffee shop. He had the relationship going. He's a great sales guy. And it finally got to the point of just, okay, tell me what it is the cost of your services are. He said $100,000. So I used my trick. Oh, I am so sorry. I've wasted your time. Well, wait a minute. What do you mean? And I said, I never brought up a dollar figure. In the course of 15 minutes over a cup of coffee, he went from $100,000 to $75,000 in the course of 15 minutes without me saying one word, not one word.
Wow.
And then from there, when it really got down to brass tacks, able to get him down to $60,000 through the collaborative negotiation process. So being quiet is sometimes really, really critical and really important and really hard for people to do, because even in conflict management, we talked about that earlier, silence is uncomfortable for a lot of people and they just can't be quiet and they want to fill this space. Let the other party be the one to fill the space and talk. Let them be the next one to say something.
That is, all of this stuff is fantastic. And I feel like there's more structural or educational negotiation stuff that we can talk about. But these kinds of power tips, I mean, these are the phrases that are going to help us make money. And it's really fascinating. I'm curious about your outlook on, because you're talking to small business owners who are often pricing their own services. And for many people that are service based, they can set their price whatever they want. And the school of thought of, well, keep on raising your price until someone says no. Ask for as much as you can get, that kind of concept. If you were going to present something like that as a small business owner, how would you go about doing it? You shared with us the lowball offer kind of strategy. How would you do, well, I'd like to ask Jennifer for $1,000 a month and see what she says. How would you do that?
My philosophy at this point in time is you don't know if you don't ask, right? If you don't ask, the answer is no every single time, every single time, right? And then if you go in with a lack of confidence and, well, I'm thinking about $1,000. What do you think? Does that display confidence? No, you know what? I've done the research. I know I'm of great value. I know this is what you're going to get with your return on investment with me. My price is $1,000. Here's what I can offer to you, or a guarantee, or we can come back and revisit like the programs that I'm offering to you, whatever it is, whatever service or product that it is that you're offering, this is what it is. The key though, is if you're going to have consumers that are within the same marketplace and you sell a same product or service, $1,000 to one person, the same exact product or service to another consumer for half the price, be careful, because that could come back to bite you. But depending on what it is, so the contract negotiation I did from $100,000 spend to $60,000, notice I didn't say the provider's name. That's by design, because I signed an agreement that I wouldn't share that, because he said no one gets that. So we need to make sure that you're not going to disclose that. So there's different strategies with that too. But value yourself the way you need to be valued. You know more than anybody else what you bring to the table and the services that you can offer. And if you start so low and that starts getting around too of, wow, you're the cheapest product in town, some people start to question that after a while. Do I want cheap, or do I want someone who's, well, most often people are really good at what they do aren't the cheapest ones. So that's how you position it, to go, I'm not the cheapest one. We say that at Bank 59. We might not be able to give you the best deposit rates that is out there, but I'm going to tell you what, here's what you're going to get in return for banking with us. And this is why it is that you want to work with us. So again, it's all those strategies, positioning yourself appropriately, knowing what your competition is selling their products and services for, and then drawing that line in the sand with what it is that you want to do. And sometimes you got to walk away from it too. If you're new to it, sometimes we're desperate, right? We're just going to be out there. We're going to say, we'll just take whatever we can get. But be careful about that too, because you don't want to get yourself stuck in that rut and later to go, I'm losing money doing this.
Yeah. I can't be the only person you've talked to about this that is surprised that it's really based in listening and asking good questions. I know that seems obvious now that we've been talking to you for 45 minutes, but when you first said that, it's like, oh, it's listening and reacting in real time and asking good questions. That's probably going to get you the deal that you're looking for. But that doesn't seem like what we were going to talk about tonight. I can't be the only one that's surprised that hears that's what's at the heart of all this.
You're absolutely right. Again, I think it goes back to when people think about negotiation and what do they often think about? They think about aggression. They think about someone who's powerful, someone who is not going to take no for an answer, only to find out it's the complete opposite of that.
Yeah. And this is great. So I've got some additional questions. We've got some folks that are here as well, and I would love to welcome you on screen to ask some questions if you have them. Put a question in the chat and we'll welcome you to the screen, because we would love to hear them, because we've got the master negotiator with us. And hopefully tonight, not only will you learn something, you'll have more money in your bank account moving forward thanks to Ann's teaching. So while we see if we get some questions that queue up into the chat, I want to ask you about one of my, it's not really a pet peeve, but it is a phrase that bothers me. When someone says, oh, come on, meet me in the middle. Is that a thing? Is that something you believe in, or does that depend on your negotiating style, or is that just as case by case basis?
It depends on what you're negotiating. So we don't only determine what our style is going to be based upon what our personal style is or what we've learned to do. It's also what are we negotiating for, and how much time do we want to invest in the negotiation. So case in point with that, I had a friend that I happened to come across on Craigslist to see she was selling some furniture that I had no idea she was selling it. And it was, oh my gosh, this is perfect. I want this furniture. But she's a friend, so I wasn't going to go in with a competing style like I tend to do with products like on Craigslist, because I don't care about relationships. But I'm going to be kind and respectful through the process. So that becomes a compromise to go, here's what I have. I don't want to insult you. You can walk away from it. Can we meet in the middle? That's about relationship building. And when I don't want to invest a ton of time into it, I don't want to go and price other furniture if we're talking, a couple $100s. But the meet me in the middle with that contract of $100,000 was like, well, no, I'm not going to meet you in the middle. I'm not, 90,000 is still not okay. So it really depends on the situation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that.
Car dealers are infamous for that. How about we meet in the middle? Heck to the no on that one. I'm not meeting you in the middle. I know exactly what I'm willing to pay. And I will tell you, and if people will say, I asked the question, how long does it take to negotiate the purchase of a vehicle at a dealership on a Saturday? Does it take, most people would say a better part of Saturday. I'm going to tell you 1 hour. And if we have time, I can tell you how you make it happen. In 1 hour, you go in and you say, this is what I have, done the research. This is what I'm willing to pay. If you're willing to sell me the car for that, that's it. That's as far as I'm going. And then be prepared to walk away when you need to. And I've walked away and I've got the call back. I walked away and I didn't get the call back. It's like, okay.
All right. That's brilliant. We do want to know that. We got a question coming in from Jennifer. So Jennifer Buchholz, go ahead and ask your question of Ann, please.
Well, when I'm thinking about some of this stuff, especially as a business owner, and again, I go back to the caring about relationships, because if I'm negotiating with Pat, like I want to make sure that he knows that I value him, the relationship, the expertise. But if I'm negotiating with some Joe Schmo that I've never met, different. So I'm kind of going philosophically. Do you kind of believe that everything is negotiable and you should at least try to negotiate everything?
Jennifer, I laugh because I absolutely agree, with the exception of even taxes. Now, death is not negotiable. And there might be one other example out there, but I am a firm believer in everything is negotiable. And quite honestly, I'm so ridiculous where I won't even walk into a store with, I don't care what it is, a pair of jeans. How many of you have walked into a retailer that will consistently negotiate the cost of a pair? I do, because I know everything's negotiable.
Wait a minute. Come on. You're walking into Target and buying a pair of jeans and negotiating with the Target lady? Come on. 100%.
And I will tell you this, Pat, how many of you would say that you could negotiate the price of a meal at McDonald's?
Stop it.
Anybody?
Come on.
100%. I challenged my students at WCTC, and I would have at least one student in every single class who negotiated the cost of a meal at McDonald's without saying, I'm going to get extra credit for this from my teacher. Now, again, that was 5 weeks course, and we spent 4 hours through that course of that 5 weeks. It can be done. It is done. It happens all the time.
I mean, I do think about, like, I want to keep more money in my pocket. So if I'm going through a place that has a loyalty card, or I'll ask if they have an extra coupon at the desk, like, I'm still from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where we are the coupon capital of the world. And I'm going to ask those questions. But is that what you're talking about, Ann, or is there a different way?
Oh, no.
Then that's a whole other class.
This is above and beyond coupons. You walk into a store. My family knows. My boys, they're 19 and 17. They no longer get embarrassed because no matter where we go, I'm going to ask, can you cut the price? But you got to find the person who can make the decision, right? You're not going to ask the McDonald's 16-year-old clerk. You're going to ask for the store manager. In cases with a jean, like, hey, are you managing the store today? I've noticed that this is on the sales rack. I really love these jeans, and I know that when it's on the sales rack, you just want to clear it out. What can you do for me? Now, Have I been turned down? I'd be lying to say that I haven't. If I'm turned down, I might give it another go. I might try a different angle or a different approach, but almost always if you get to the person who can make the decision, I've even said, I'm a teacher of negotiations. Like, don't let me have a failed story for my students. Please, what can you do for me? Like, it's the whole purpose of it. It's just, now I need to be able to do this.
All right.
I feel like we should have a money tracker to see like how much we're saving now that we're going to start doing this. And like, again, throw that into like an idea collective piggy bank to buy drinks later. I don't know.
Well, again, of course, to buy alcohol.
I love it. If you don't ask the question, the answer is always no.
Okay. So we have to stop. I'm sorry. Julie's with me in the comments here. All right. So I take my family to McDonald's, and you're saying you're negotiating the price on the menu at McDonald's. How does that work? Do you really just say, what can you do for me, and stand there and make them feel uncomfortable and they discount you?
So the strategies that the students used, I actually did not do it myself, but I knew it could be done. I mean, you can do that at any store or restaurant. So one of the students was really clever and said, I noticed that I'm just making up. I haven't been to McDonald's in a long time. I love it, but I don't go there. And let's just say it's a McRib sandwich. Hey, I see you brought the McRib back. I come to McDonald's all the time. I'm not really sure about the barbecue sauce flavor this time around. Are you willing to reduce the cost of the McRib sandwich for me? And I promise you that if I like it, I'll be your best customer. I'll keep coming back. Well, in one instance, the manager said, here you go. Try the meal out. Tell me what you think. Gave it to that person at no cost. Others have been like, just a reduction of $1. Sure, I'll take $1 off. Here's what we can do. Now, those are the people who are brave enough to ask. I think if everybody asked and positioned it correctly, they all would have been able to do it. But if you're not comfortable with doing it, don't start at McDonald's. Go to a flea market.
Yeah.
Place ever to negotiate.
That's mind blowing. Okay, great. Ariel, you have a question for us? Go ahead.
I do. Yes. So it seems to me that the negotiation, it's kind of one of those things of it's easier to work your way down than to work your way up. And as you talk about the different styles of negotiation, I find that fascinating. But it seems that kind of coming from that negotiation, perhaps not natural, perhaps developed, but that ability to negotiate early on and that competitive style, I want to say,
yes.
It's easier to go into that collaborative style and maybe I'm assuming here, but to transition into the more collaborative or compromising or avoiding styles. You say that avoiding is hard for you, but I'm curious, like going from compromising or avoiding collaborating to then the competitive style seems like a big shift or transition. So how do you help or encourage people to kind of shift into that? Because I see it as a mindset shift and a total jump in a way.
I think you just hit it on the head, Ariel. And I would argue that going either way is tough. So my natural style is competing. And believe you me, when I've had to learn how to compromise, the question is, do you want to be right or you want to be happy? My answer is always, I want to be right. I don't really care about being happy. But I would say it absolutely is a mind shift. And I think about, especially when we talk about it in the context of business, and that is negotiation is business, right? It's just business. It's nothing personal. And if we're taking on those characteristics of a good negotiator by being respectful and a good listener and being confident, who could argue that that's something that you shouldn't be doing, that's wrong? We have to get over the hurdle. And I think about it in terms of kids. Why are children such great negotiators, right? You think about the toddlers. Well, they don't take no for an answer, right? And they're persistent. And as soon as someone gives in, they go at it and they're not embarrassed. They don't even know to be embarrassed. And then when I ask adults, well, why are you uncomfortable negotiating? Well, adults are embarrassed to be told no. They don't want to be told no. Maybe they don't want to take the time to plan for the negotiation. They're always, I don't want to insult someone. How is it insulting by asking the question? We can't control how other people are going to react to the questions that we have. It's in conflict management. It's having difficult conversations. We can only control what we say and our own emotions. And if we do it professionally and put it out there to say, this is what I'm looking to achieve, this is why I want it, it's pretty hard to criticize unless you're dealing with someone who's irrational. And we all have those people that we have to deal with. Well, I write them off. Don't base your style and approach on that. But it is that mind shift of going, let's face it, no one looks out for ourselves the way we look out for ourselves, right? So as much as I like Pat, if it came down to me or Pat, sorry, Pat, it's going to be about me, right? So we have to think about it in those terms as well. And when someone has to make a difficult business decision, are they thinking about the other party? Hopefully, but in the end, they're going to do what's in the best interest of the business.
I love that. And Pat, could I ask a question on or share a recent story? Because and as you say that, I don't come from the competitive style, so it's a natural for me. I probably come from the compromising or not avoiding, but one of the other two that you mentioned. Accommodating. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I'm compromising or accommodating, but somewhere in that range. And I had an event today that Pat alluded to at the beginning, and I reached out to sponsors, and I actually reached out to one last minute, and I called and I was very nervous because I'm asking for a sponsorship last minute, essentially asking for money with very little time to promote their business in between. I said it's a very bold request, and the response was absolutely no question. Send over paper, we're good to go. So that was great, and I was very happy about that. So put it out there. The funny thing is, I cared a lot about promoting the sponsors at the event and sharing their partnership for it. I had 3 people tell me they were offended by me not asking for their sponsorship for the event, which blew my mind. 3 people were offended I did not ask them for money. I was like, wait, what? I have insulted you by not asking for. I'm so confused.
We make up stories in our own mind. We convince ourselves that, oh my gosh, if we ask this, what are people going to think about us? How are they going to react? How are we going to respond? And it is interesting. And you often hear that from people, whether it's from business or for charity. And why didn't you ask me to reach out? We have to get comfortable hearing no, right? We just have to get comfortable hearing no. And again, if it's not something that's natural to you, go to the flea market, hear no, like 10, 20, 30 times. Get comfortable with that. Look at the reactions. People will be like, I'm not even talking to you, and you're like, okay, well, and then I'll usually say something smart. I look like, well, the answer is always no if you don't ask, and then walk away. But just be comfortable with that. And then when you start hearing yes, that's something you have to keep putting in your brain to go, the last time I did this, it was successful. And remember those success stories and repeat them to yourselves. We oftentimes will go into, oh my gosh, I have to give a presentation. It's going to be terrible. It's going to, well, guess what? It's going to be terrible because we just told ourselves that, versus the last time I did it. And I can say to myself, oh, I should have said this, or I was too goofy with that, talking to Pat's class. But instead I'm going to say, well, I think I did okay. The group was asking me questions and it seemed engaging. So I'm going to go with that. Got to tell ourselves those stories so we can be more confident.
If you look at this space, you'll see why high school prepared me to hear no a lot. That's why I'm a master negotiator, you see. So that really prepared me for the rest of my life. We've got a couple of more questions. We're almost out of time. And this is why you buy a ticket and come to night school. Or if you're an Idea Collective member, you not only get free tickets, you get free tickets for your friends and colleagues, because we're going to get some bonus time with Ann off the air and soak up all this good stuff. But Julie Feldman has a question. So Julie, go ahead.
I had a client who always argued about price. Always. He wanted more for less. And I got tired of dealing with it. So I've set prices with my business. I offer discounts to nonprofits, or if a company orders a series of videos. But he would want one-off work and always try and get at least 40% off. And I just finally, I said, I'm really sorry. I can't do this. He stopped calling and I missed the work, but I just couldn't take it anymore. Did I make a mistake?
100% no. Again, remember earlier I talked about we have to draw that line in the sand. So what is our value? What is it that we're willing to give up in return for the services that we're willing to offer? And at some point, and those are the people that I classify. You know, I work in the field of human resources. You can't rationalize with someone who's irrational. This is someone who is a taker, taker, taker. Is this someone you want a partnership or relationship with? And when you think about, he walked away from a relationship that you had after giving in, giving in, giving in. You have to ask yourself long-term to go, was that worth it? I mean, and is that someone you want to continue to work with, or do you want to establish now new relationships where there's going to be a little bit of give and take, but at the same token to go, now you don't have to deal with that because you're probably getting frustrated. You're spending a lot of time on it, over explaining what it is, why it is that the price was set the way that it is. Again, if you're desperate, maybe, but even then I just say, spend that time on someone else who you're going to have a great partnership with, who's going to find value in what it is that you offer. Because my guess is he's the guy who negotiates for everything and is so ridiculous and over the top that there's just no winning with him.
Thank you.
That's a great question, Julie. Thank you. All right. So we're almost out of time, Ann, but I can't let you off the hook without you telling us how you negotiate for a car. You touched on it, but we need to know this because cars need to be purchased and it's not a fun experience. So how do you buy a car in less than an hour? We need to know.
So I spend, the last vehicle I purchased, it was my Lexus SUV. It's used. It makes it sound better than it is. It wasn't a great vehicle. So I spent at least 10 hours of research before I even walked into a dealership. And I knew exactly what that vehicle was worth and what I wanted with the bells and the whistles that were on it and the things that weren't on it and what I was willing to spend. And before even going into the dealership, it's making a phone call to say, I know you've got this vehicle on the lot. Here's another key piece. You find out how long the vehicles for sale are, especially if you're buying a used car, how long it's been on the lot. The longer it's been on the lot, the greater the likelihood that you have a lot more flexibility with that pricing, because it costs them a lot of money to keep vehicles sitting on the lot after about 2 or 3 weeks. So I found out the vehicles at various dealerships, how long they were on the lot, and had the conversation over the phone. Here's what I'm willing to spend. Excuse me, let me take that back. I never said, here's what I'm willing to spend. That's a key component. And that is, I want to buy this vehicle. What can you do for me? So you have to recognize there are certain, who are the audiences that want to squeeze the most money they can out of you. Car dealership is one of them. Vendors are another one. Other providers, even medical doctors. That's a whole nother discussion. I negotiate costs of medical bills too. So that's for another day. But I will tell you that waiting to hear the price and to go, I've done this research. This is what I know the value of the car is. And really coming to an agreement with that. And if someone says, I can't, okay, we're done. And then you move on to the next one. But then once you can agree then on that price, I'm making this a super fast story in the essence of time. The deal is done before I step into the dealership. And then I say, when I step into that dealership, you have 1 hour. And I mean it. You have 1 hour. And if that contract isn't ready for me to sign and we aren't ready to go, I will walk away from this deal because I know that I can get the same car that I have to drive only 20 minutes to get the vehicle. So don't waste my time. And when I position things that way, they know I mean business and I'm going to walk away if it doesn't happen the way that I want it to happen.
So my final question is, can we hire you to buy cars for us? Because that sounds pretty amazing. That sounds awesome. You
know what, Pat, I have this like weird thing inside to go, maybe I need to start a consulting business to go, I will negotiate. I love just doing it because it's fun for me. I love negotiating. But if I can say, I'll take 20% of the difference. So if you spend less than what it is you thought, and then I just get 20% of the difference. But for this class, I will offer this, which is if any of you do have specific questions, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to you at no cost whatsoever, and to give you some ideas and some suggestions.
That is incredible. And that is a for real business for someone that's negotiating a rent or renting a facility or some of these big picture, big ticket items. It would be absolutely worth the money to keep you entertained and, give you something to do, something that you like to do.
100%.
We're into that. It has been such a pleasure to talk with you. Is there anything that we haven't covered or a last thought that you have when it comes to negotiating as a small business owner?
We covered so much that the last piece, contracts, and I know it was one of the prepared questions that we discussed, Pat, and that is when you talk about a contract, people often think about, okay, this is what I'm willing to spend. And I'll share this quickly. I'm going to throw a technical term at you. It's called BATNA. BATNA means best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So you go in with the mindset of what it is you're willing to spend. And maybe it's at you're renting space for an event that you're holding. And you find that this space is standing firm. There is no negotiation, or they're not coming any lower, but they're willing to throw in appetizers for you, for the audience. Like, oh, I never thought about that. That is a best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So you don't have to feel like, oh my gosh, I ended up spending more than I wanted. Did you though? Because now if you're trying to draw people in and you've got appetizers and you would have spent $300 on that, now you've got another win-win situation. So think about keeping an open mind in negotiations. Sometimes you go in with this mindset, I am like my car, I'm not willing to spend any more than this. But there are other cases to go, if they can throw in something to sweeten the pot and I'm willing to consider it, that would be something that would still be a successful negotiation.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's not often that I end an hour-long interview with more questions than when I came in, but this has been fantastic stuff. Absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for your time tonight. And the goal tonight was to help us get our head around negotiating as a small business owner and understand that we've got more control than we think and what it takes to be successful and how we should look and think about negotiating. So as you say, we do it every day and we have the chance to really affect our bottom line when we do. Ann Knutson, HR Director and Senior Vice President for Bank 59. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much. It was great spending the time with all of you. Thank you.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's my pleasure. Well, this is Idea Collective Night School. We do it every single month. We bring in super smart people like Ann. So if you want to join us next month, we've got our night schools planned throughout the summer into the fall as well. And if you know a great presenter that you would think would be a great night school panelist, let us know, because night school is one of our signature events here in the Idea Collective, presented by Bank 59, Quick Trip, Serendipity Labs, and the Idea Collective for small business owners. I'm Pat Miller, the Idea Coach. And for the folks that are here with us in real time, we're going to log off and ask Ann more questions because that's the fun stuff. So with that, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.